The August 25th, 2021 monthly meeting of the Dickinson County School Board is now in session. For the record, I would like to recognize that all of our school board members are present. In addition, Tanya Baker, Board Clerk, and Mrs. Robinson, Division Superintendent. Scott Mullins, our school board attorney, is not able to be with us today. At this time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. Board members, we have the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
Mr. Mullins, we do have an addition, please, to the agenda. M, proposed budget revisions to FY 21-22.
Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the addition?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That brings us to public comment. Mr. Hicks, will you please read the guidelines for public comment? Yes, sir.
A period of time for public comment will be designated on the meeting agenda during which the public may comment on issues related to public education. The Dickinson County School Board believes that citizens of the county should be heard and that this is an acceptable format for receiving public comment. After the public comment section of the meeting is closed, the public shall not be allowed to participate in general board member discussions regarding agenda items. Public participation with the board members regarding agenda items can be disruptive, and the practice is prohibited by Robert's Rules of Order. It is the desire of the school board to treat each member of the public fairly and equally. Allowing one individual to participate while excluding others is unfair. The board may hold such public hearings as may be necessary to allow the public to more fully express their concerns, or the board may place the public comment section of any meeting at the end of the meeting to allow additional public comments. While we do not wish to restrict the free expression of opinion, we feel that certain restrictions may be necessary so that order and reasonable standards of decorum may be maintained. We ask that the following standards be adhered to. The speaker will be recognized by the chair. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. Speakers will refrain from the use of vulgarity or profanity and will avoid negative or embarrassing comments directed towards specific children or students. Board members should not respond to issues presented by speakers unless clarification is necessary. Matters of concern raised under public comment will be referred to the proper official for investigation and future board consideration if necessary.
Thank you. Mrs. Martin, will you please be our timekeeper? For public comment, we would like to recognize Kathy Music with VPE. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is... Is it on?
There you go.
Well, it was on. It just keeps going off. See, it goes... Good evening. All right. My name is Kathy Music, and I work for Virginia Professional Educators, and it's my pleasure to be before you tonight. I put at each of your stations, I guess, a brochure that tells about our organization. This time of year, we always start to think about the fall submission of our grants and scholarships. This year, the date is November 15th. So I just want to remind everybody, the organization I work for, we're a nonprofit, and after all the bills are paid, we try to put all the money back into the classroom for teachers. So if a teacher needed to go back to school wanted to take a class. The grants and stipends are up to $500. It wouldn't pay, for, of course, for the whole class, but it would help. So I just wanted to remind you about our grants and stipends and give you a brochure that tells about our organization as well. And thank you for all you do. And I guess the year is off to a good start, and I want to congratulate those teachers and all the staff and custodians. And it's another difficult year, but I know there's no more resilient group than educators, so hopefully we'll get through this one too, but thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Ms. Music. And I'd just like to remind our audience, when they come, you may think that you're yelling, but with the rain, you may be difficult to hear you. So please speak up as you come forward. Thank you.
And that brings us to Phyllis Mullins with the DEA.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. You will notice the little brown bags in front of you. Those are the welcome back bags that we gave to all of our members through a grant from VEA, a TOPS grant. And VEA also offers mini grants that will be due on September 17th that our members can apply for. There is some chocolate in those bags, so enjoy. On another note, I have had numerous members contact, and they are concerned about the quarantine and use of their days if they have COVID or are quarantined. And we would like to ask the board to please consider something that can be done so that we don't have to use our days. And maybe come up with some kind of plan or proposal that would help with that. And I certainly appreciate everything that you do, and if I can be of any assistance, please let me know. I'll be glad to work with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Linda Tipton.
Good evening. My name is Linda Tipton, and I'm a veteran special education teacher at Ridgeview High School. I'm addressing you, the board, and superintendent this afternoon as a representative of the faculty and staff of Dickinson County Schools in an effort to change the policy that is currently in place for having employees use their accrued sick days for COVID-related absences. Our neighboring Buchanan County school system is using leftover COVID funds to pay their teachers, and I think it is not unreasonable to ask that our county school board follow suit. Many teachers and staff members have very few days to carry them through the school year. If it comes down to having a negative balance for days, the financial loss for many would be extremely difficult to bear. For myself, my family is facing multiple critical illnesses, including my son-in-law who has stage 4 cancer. We have upcoming surgeries at both Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville and Cleveland Clinic at Cleveland, Ohio. Our family, as are many others, is stretched thin in trying to maneuver these times. Our sick days are vital to us. We cannot afford to use up 10 days at a time to cover our time off during a COVID-related illness or quarantine. It is my understanding that a great deal of COVID funds was funneled toward the new elementary school wing. By doing this, we may have been left with teachers and staff having to use their sick days instead of proactively reserving some of the funds to target losses related to the pandemic for this school year. This pandemic is far from over, as I know you all may know, and it's only getting worse. My daughter, who's a teacher at Sandwick Elementary, she just tested positive today. Your teachers and staffs are on the front lines daily dealing with the effects of COVID. Even vaccinated, there are multiple cases since school began where teachers are missing school because of contracting the virus or having to quarantine. You, as superintendent and board members, are charged with a very important task, to be good stewards of the money given to our schools. While it may be a windfall for fixing the problem of not enough space for our elementary students to be housed at the new elementary school, it cannot come at the cost of turning our backs on those employees that are showing up every day in order to be there for our children. We have important work to do this year, and we cannot do it effectively if we forsake the very ones charged with making the school year a successful one. When you discuss this matter, as I hope you do, I would like to ask you to look at this situation through the eyes of the instructional aide that barely makes a living wage and has to forfeit their pay when absent. Through the eyes of the single parent and teacher that is solely responsible for shuttling their children to various appointments and having unexpected absences because of illness. Through the eyes of all those employees whose families singly rely on their income. I would bring to your mind John 13:35 in the New King James Version, which says, "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." My parents taught me that we must always consider others in every decision of our lives. We, the teachers and staff of Dickinson County, are doing our part. So now it is time for you who are in charge to recognize what a hardship this policy is for many, very many, and to do the right thing. I'm asking that you put your heads together, dig deep, and find a solution. We appreciate everything you do, and we just ask that you would do this for us. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Ms. Tipton. John Sutherland.
Can you hear me? Are we good? Okay. What I was going to talk about is a frontline healthcare provider in Dixon County for the last 17 years. I've had many approach me with questions regarding COVID, vaccines, and masking. As a professional, I always give them my honest opinion, as I've given many here in this room this evening, including board members. Since the beginning of the school year, my opinion of masking students and faculty has been the same. If we're using the Virginia Department of Health guidelines to quarantine and limit COVID exposures, then I am in favor of students masking. The guidelines are readily available online and have been adopted by our board in previous meetings. I guess the two main key points on the guidelines is anyone closer than 6 feet without a mask on for a cumulative 15 minutes within a 24-hour span, or closer than 3 feet for a cumulative 15 minutes with a mask on. But I have seen that we are still using a blanket quarantine that does not adhere to the guidelines. I'm not sure if this is an issue of interpretation or a functional issue of adhering to the guidelines in our schools. We've had 2 positive cases at Ridgeview Middle School. I know there's been more since I wrote this yesterday. But we've had 2 positive cases at Ridgeview Middle School that has resulted in a total of 36 kids being quarantined. While this may come across as erring on the side of caution, quarantine for a child is equivalent to a house arrest. Henceforth, we must make every effort to make sure that the guidelines have been compromised before we restrict children from in-person learning. I'm hard-pressed to believe that 36 students were within 3 feet of these students while masks at school. While I've reached out to some of the faculty, I've been told seating charts are reviewed. This should be irrelevant, as we should have enough room in our schools to space the students 3 feet apart in the classrooms. The only issues that I think that we should have is on the bus when they're seated adjacent to someone, or when they have their mask removed at lunch. We have surveillance throughout our schools, and it should be utilized to make certain. This blanket quarantine strategy is not being used by other school systems that I've spoken with. Actually spoke with an employee from Union that said they had a bunch quarantined from one particular positive case, and they had 6. We're averaging, I think, approximately 15. Inappropriate use of quarantine has many negative effects, including loss of in-person instruction, depression, panic, and supervision constraints. Personally, my situation, me and my wife work 11, 12-hour days, so we cannot come home at 8 p.m. and give adequate in-person instruction to 3 children. As for the quarantine of the JV volleyball team in particular, we used a blanket quarantine despite having evidence of which kids would have been in close contact. We have bus surveillance, gym surveillance, and the NFHS broadcast of any games should have been reviewed during this time frame. But I was told by a faculty member that the decision was made by the school board and the Virginia Department of Health. I contacted the VDH and they said the decision came based upon information that the board gave them. Since it has been proven the virus is spread via aerosolized droplets, not contact, there is no issue with the kids touching the same ball or equipment. With this in mind, I do not think the entire team was in direct contact with the infected individual. I consider myself friends with the majority of the faculty, administration, and this board. While I feel there are no malicious intentions, these blanket quarantines are going to give our board a bad optic. If we're going to utilize the blanket quarantine, then there is no need for a mask mandate. To a panicked outsider, it almost looks like we're trying to have the school shuttered again. And I mean outside of Dickinson County. In conclusion, if we adhere to the VDH guidelines, the board has my support in regards to masking. Once we deviate and begin to use blanket quarantines to interpret guidelines and place non-contacted healthy kids in house arrest, then I don't think I or any of the Dickinson County citizens can support this board's decision. And thank you. I've got to go back to work.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. We have Mr. John Blansett.
Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
All right, good evening. My name is John Blansett, and I'm here to address you in regards to the mask mandates and the forced quarantine of our children. I imagine many of you are well-educated people, some of you being former educators yourself. Knowing this, I'm sure you were taught critical thinking skills during your time as students. Unfortunately, it seems as if no one on this board or anyone at the VDH has chosen to use those skills in the decisions involving our children in regards to the COVID-19 virus and the precautions thereof. These decisions that have been made are based on fear and compliance, not on statistics and actual science. The Merriam-Webster defines science as the state of knowledge, as distinguished from ignorance or misunderstanding. So let's look at what the science says. And all this data is in the information that I've provided for you. According to the CDC, the pediatric influenza deaths in the United States are as follows. The 2018 and 19 flu season, 477 pediatric deaths from the flu. 2017 to 18, 643 deaths. 2016 to 17, 251 deaths. 2015 to 16, 268 deaths. 2014 to 15, 803 deaths. 2013 to 14, 130 deaths. 2012 to 2013, 1,160 pediatric deaths caused by the flu. Now let's compare those numbers to the current COVID pediatric death toll. For the entirety of the pandemic, which is approaching the 2-year mark, as of the last CDC update, there has been 430 total pediatric deaths reported due to COVID-19. When you consider the data in comparison of the two viruses, it appears that the flu virus is far worse a threat to our children than the COVID-19 virus. Yet past mitigation strategies pale in comparison to the authoritarian policies in place today. Before COVID, students were not only encouraged to come to school sick so long as they were fever-free, regardless of symptoms, but parents faced retaliation if we didn't send their children. Schools even offered pizza parties to children that didn't miss a day. My daughter gets on the bus at 6:30 a.m. and gets home at 4 p.m. That's 9.5 hours masked for a virus that statistically tells us that is not a serious threat to her. She's 10 years old. Instead, we're teaching them that the air around them is toxic, that their friends are dangerous, and that if they expose their face in public, certain death will follow. Now, I understand some parents are scared, and they have their reasons that are valid for their family's needs. And thankfully, we have a virtual option in place for them. But what about the adults in the school system, some of you may ask? Well, they are welcome to take the vaccine and wear their mask. My child has the right to breathe fresh air, but instead she wears a moist, soiled mask all day that does very little in the way of protecting her or others around her. This is evidenced by the recent mass quarantining of children in this school system. If these masks and other mitigation strategies are so effective or so important, why are we quarantining so many children for 14 full days for minimal contact? For example, my nephew currently on quarantine because he was eating lunch in the lunchroom and a child at the table near him, tested positive. When his parents asked if they could wait 5 days, and retest, and on day 7, if he was negative return, the answer was no. When we look at the VDH guidance, they give an allowance to those who have no symptoms and have a negative test to return after 10 days, unless the school board requires 14 days. So why are we requiring 14 days? If a child is quarantined a second time, they will in fact have lost an entire month of school for eating lunch. It is obvious that the mitigation strategies are not effective and need a revision. So my question to you guys is, what's the end game? The virus is not going away, so what are we going to do 5, 10 years from now? That's all I have. I want to leave you with this quote, and it reads, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands at moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Blackett. Our next agenda item is the consent agenda, which includes the approval of minutes, approval of monthly bills, discussion of school activity funds, approval of elementary school construction invoices, and the approval of the construction account reconciliation document. Any question or discussion on the consent agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say yes. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next agenda item is information for the school board. Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. Thank you so much for this opportunity. At our last school board meeting, we were asked by the board to discuss the cultural competency training, and I'd like to ask Mr. Mark Mullins to come to the front, please, and address the board on that issue.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I do have a little bit of information for you. I don't have a whole lot, unfortunately, but I want to share what we have at this time. I think you've got 2 items. Hopefully, Ms. Baker has put them on your desk that we're going to refer to here this evening. And some of this, I apologize to you, but I'm going to have to read it. So that's why I've got my glasses here. I want to make sure we cover the material correctly. The first information we received regarding cultural competency was a press release from the Virginia Department of Education dated March 24th, 2021. And I think that's one of the items that you have in front of you. The release stated that the Virginia Board of Education would put practices in place to complete an evaluation standard on cultural responsive teaching and practices. This would carry out legislation that was approved by the 2021 General Assembly. So that was the first notification that we received. On April the 15th of 2021, approximately 3 weeks later, we received communication that the new licensing requirements covering cultural competency would go into effect July 1, 2021, which would be just a couple months later. At that time, I notified our teachers who were still up for license renewal for 2021 to try to encourage them to complete all requirements before July 1 because these new requirements were going to be put in place, and the communication that we had received said they would, fall under those guidelines and would need to complete those requirements. On June the 17th, 2021, we received Superintendent's Memo, number 164-21, and that's the other item you have in front of you, stating the following. During the 2021 legislative session, the General Assembly passed Senate Bill 1196 and House Bill 1904 to advance cultural competency training for school staff. The new law contains 4 different mandates and states that 1. Evaluations shall include an evaluation of cultural competency. And what they're referring to here are teacher evaluations, administrator evaluations, and superintendent evaluations, all 3 required by the Virginia Department of Education. Number 2, every person seeking initial licensure or renewal of a license shall complete instruction or training in cultural competency. And 3, every person seeking initial licensure or renewal of a license with an endorsement in history and social sciences shall complete instruction in African American history as prescribed by the board. And before I go to number 4, those 2 items for initial licensure and renewal of a license, the state refers to these type requirements as statutory requirements. They have others. They include training in first aid, CPR, and AED, dyslexia awareness, child abuse recognition. One of the most recent that came into play just this past year, behavior intervention. And we also have one for civics education. And that's for folks who have certain endorsements that could teach either civics at the middle school level or government at the high school level. Then the 4th mandate that is referred to under this new law, each school board shall adopt and implement policies that require each teacher and any other school board employee holding a license issued by the board to complete cultural competency training in accordance with guidance issued by the board at least every 2 years. I'll just state here that the other requirements I just shared with you, first aid, CPR, civics education, dyslexia awareness, those are only required every renewal cycle. You have to do those once every renewal cycle. This is different. This states that the cultural competency training will be required at least every 2 years. So that's a definite difference for our licensed personnel. Each school board employee who's required to complete a cultural competency training shall complete at least one such training no later than the beginning of the 22-23 school year. No later than December 31st, 2021, the Board of Education shall issue guidance that establishes minimum standards for the cultural competency training required. Each component of the law will be implemented via action by the State Board of Education. The memo goes on to state at the bottom, it should be noted that none of the new requirements will go into effect during the 21-22 school year. However, the different components of the law will be phased in over the coming years as regulatory changes are made and training is made available to school division staff. And then the latest information that we have received is information from an email dated August the 13th, almost 2 weeks ago, I guess, from Maggie Clemens, Director of the Office of Licensure and School Leadership at the Virginia Department of Education. I had contacted the office as I'm trying to work with our teachers who are up for license renewal this year to try to determine whether they needed to take these trainings, and if they were available, at this time. And I wanted to make them aware of that as we talked about these other requirements that they need to make sure they have completed during the year. So her email to me from August 13th states, in part, the policy change related to licensure requirements and cultural competency training requires full regulatory consideration by the board. A process that has an anticipated completion of the regulatory process in late 2022 or early 2023. The changes to the history and social science endorsement requirement will be implemented with a separate action, which is anticipated to be completed in summer of 2022. Additionally, the Virginia Department of Education is working with several partners to develop trainings for both cultural competency and African American history. To ensure there are different training options and that each option meets the board's prescribed curriculum standards, the anticipated effective date for both these regulation changes is July 1, 2023. So the latest email seems to somewhat contradict the superintendent's memo in regard to the effective dates. The superintendent's memo says the training will be completed prior to the 2022-2023 school year, which is next school year. The email from the director says the effective date will be July 1, 2023, and that's basically for the 23-24 school year. So I'm not trying to confuse you, but I'm just trying to let you know this is the information that we've received at this time on cultural competency. I have no items to be able to share, no sample training. We do learn from this, and it's a good thing to hear. They're working with several different partners to develop trainings. So that's a normal process for the Department of Education. For instance, with the dyslexia awareness, they work through Old Dominion University. For the child abuse recognition, of course, they work through the Virginia Department of Social Services. So they do work with different agencies. In this case, it appears they're working with several agencies to develop training. And by what we have here, it looks like those training opportunities should be out there by the end of December 2021. There's nothing that's required for our teachers this year. It's coming. It's either going to be next year or the following, and I wish I could clarify that, but that's why I wanted to share all that with you. It's a little bit confusing to me, I have to be honest with you. I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions?
I'll go ahead and ask is this something they're wanting us to act on now? Because, they're not, it doesn't sound like they're ready for us to act on it.
I don't think we can. I don't think the approved trainings are not available yet. But it will be a requirement for licensure. It will be a requirement for teacher, administrator, and superintendent evaluations. That has passed. What that looks like right now, I don't think we know. So to answer your question, Mr. Hackney, right now I don't think we have to do anything. I don't think we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important that, I think there was some confusion at the last meeting that this cultural competency was a curriculum, and there's no way, this is not a curriculum at all that will be taught to students. It's only for our teachers to do a little training before they do their renewal of their licensure or initial licensure.
That's my understanding, and then the other part is it'll be a part of teacher evaluation.
Right.
And of course, that takes, I think there's 7 performance standards in teacher evaluation now. I guess this will be the 8th, but you're looking at items such as professionalism, instructional delivery, instructional planning, student growth, all those, I guess, cultural competency will become a part of that in the future. But it's, they have to go through, I guess, the regulatory process to get that added. But I think you're right, Mr. Hicks, that it's not, my understanding, it's not a curriculum.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins. Mrs. Robinson, will you please tell us about some good news from our schools?
Before I do that, Mr. Mullins, if I could direct the board to their green information in their packets. Again, under the information for the board, this particular memo you received, it's Superintendent's Memo 230-21, Preparing for Instructional Disruptions During the 21-22 School Year. As you have, we have received many, many questions regarding the school year this year, such as, are we going to go hybrid? Are we all going to go virtual? You know, the same frustrations, I think, that have been expressed during public comment. We have all felt those and are working through all of the issues. If you turn your attention to Superintendent's Memo 230-21, Preparing for Instructional Disruption, it's in the green portion of your packet. You'll see that the first bullet describes Senate Bill 1303, and as you recall, Senate Bill 1303 mandates that all schools, and again, this is law, mandates that all schools and public school-based early childhood care and education programs offer 180 days or 990 hours of in-person instruction to each student during the 21-22 school year, except when health conditions have necessitated or school closures to address the transmission of COVID-19 in the school building. Last year, because we were under an emergency order, the state superintendent of education had the power to waive many of these mandates that school divisions have to follow. One of them was 180 days or the 990 hours. The state superintendent does not have that authority this year. So that is the first issue that we have. So to answer the question, at this time, will we go back to a hybrid situation where students attend school 2 days a week and in smaller groups? It does not appear that State Bill 1303 will allow that flexibility. You'll notice also that such closures are in collaboration with the local health department and will only last for as long as it's necessary to address the level of transmission. So for example, if we are in a situation in one of our schools that because of the number of transmission, we, in consultation with the Virginia Department of Health, and their recommendation is that our transmission is high, the impact on the school is high, then we will close that school, provide instruction virtually, but it will only be for a period of time. It will not be for the entire year, it will not be for 6 weeks, it will only be approximately for 10 days. Please stop me if you have any questions or anything in that manner as we go along. The next page talks about expectations for remote learning option. As you know, this year we have, with the board's approval, contracted with Edgenuity. And we have, and I'll ask Ms. Martin in just a moment, but approximately, I'm going to say 60 students that are participating in virtual learning. These students are part of our school system. They're counted present. They receive a Chromebook. They are just like they were our students in the classroom. So we have Edgenuity as a remote learning option because State Bill House 1303 also mandates that we may offer a virtual component. On page 3 of the memo, if you look to see about preparing for school or school closures, if you recall last year, we discussed that the VDOE was going to allow 10 unscheduled days for weather-related causes. For example, if we have a snow day, we can't come to school, we can declare a virtual day, and teachers may either have the opportunity to work from home or work from school. Students have their Chromebooks, and we can have virtual classes. That will count as one of those unscheduled days, according to our understanding of this issue right now. But if a school is closed due to COVID transmission, then it has to use it has to use the unscheduled days of instruction, okay? So for example, School X has to close for the next 10 days. That will fall under those 10 unscheduled days. If it goes over the 10, then we may request a waiver, but we have to meet the 990 or the 180 days. So as you see, this year is completely different from last year. We have less flexibility as far as the standards that we have to meet as a public school division. So that is one thing there to do that. If a school or subset of a school is closed, for example, if we have a grade level or a classroom in a school, that through consultation with the Virginia Department of Health, the recommendation is to just go virtual in just that classroom. That will not count. We're allowed to do that, but that will not count. And that flexibility and guidance has changed several times during the summer. But this is what we have right now as of August the 18th. Now let's talk about students that are quarantined. And I know that is a very frustrating issue, and I know it is for parents, but I can also tell you it is a very frustrating issue for staff members and all of us that are involved. In addition to school enclosures, divisions should be prepared to transition individual students in and out of in-person learning for quarantine due to COVID. So the COVID quarantine is not just a Dickson County issue, it is a statewide issue that is determined by the Virginia Department of Health. We do assist the Virginia Department of Health in identifying students that may have to be quarantined by providing seating charts, close contacts, those kinds of things, but ultimately it is the decision of the local health department with the CDC. As you recall, from day one, March 13th, 2020, when this really started, the directive has been follow the CDC health guidelines. Follow the local health department guidelines. The reason that is the local health department is fully aware of what is going on in our region, the number of cases, and are best to recommend the school divisions and others, because of this is what we recommend. So we have always tried to follow what is recommended by the local health department for the safety and the health of all of our children. We don't always like what we hear, but we have found that those recommendations in the long run have helped to keep our students healthy and our staff healthy. And we'll discuss numbers in just a few moments, and I'll share that with you. Quarantine students, and this is something that, again, we're working through, should be receiving instruction either through Google Meets or learning packets, learning modules. And after the child has done or participated in the Google Meets or has completed the learning modules, then their absence can be turned to a present. Okay? So they're not going to be counted absent if they participate in instruction, if they complete their work, if they do the things that we are asking all of our children to do, their absence will then transition to a present. And that will certainly help them in their attendance, and just not only that, but it will help them hopefully to maintain where they are and not to get any farther behind. because that is not what we want. So the last page of this is just more information regarding quarantine students, regarding virtual students, regarding closures, regarding what the Senate Bill 1303 actually mandates, and the lack of flexibility that we have available this year. Now, we've talked, yesterday we met with Google Meets with all of our principals and administrative staff and went over the same information so that we would all be kind of in the same page, because we're all facing the same questions, the same comments, so this is where we are with that. So I'm going to stop there. I know that some of you may have questions, so may I help with any questions that you may have, and if I don't know them, I will certainly find out for you.
I think one that's came up from several people that have contacted me is related to if they started off in person, do they have options to then go to virtual?
That's a great, thank you, Mr.
You want to talk about that? I know there's some,
Right.
we have limitations on a lot of things right now. That may be one of them.
Yeah. Last year, since we were doing virtual in-house, students had the option of going from in-person to virtual to back to in-person to back to virtual, and many of our students had that kind of schedule all year long. There were extenuating circumstances, all of the reasons, all right? And that was very difficult to keep up with at school. That was very difficult on students, and children were just in and out. This year, with Senate Bill 1303, the emphasis is on in-person instruction. So once a child is in person, and after the grace period with Edgenuity, they will need to remain in person until December when the new semester begins, okay? Now, it's different for virtual students. A virtual student who is in Edgenuity can return to in-person anytime. So if they're in school 6 weeks in virtual and they say, this is not for me, I want to come back to in-person, then House Bill 1303, or Senate Bill 1303, I apologize, does allow for that, for them, virtual students to return at any time. But it does not give that same flexibility to in-person.
Right, and let's say they were on virtual and they make that decision to come back in person, they're then locked in person until January. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As you recall, the school division is paying Edgenuity for the instruction of these students, okay? So if we have a virtual student that comes back, that's wonderful. That's what we want in person. After the grace period, Edgenuity has their contracts with their staff. They are ready to go, and so the number of students, in-person students going to virtual, will be something that will disrupt their learning environment. So they can certainly return to virtual, but they will have to wait until the end of the semester. Other questions? So our teachers now and our staff members, we're dealing with virtual, you know, the virtual students, and we're also dealing with a number of quarantine students. And so that, I know, is frustrating in itself, and so we're working through all the process. One thing that we've talked about a great deal is that we did not anticipate to begin the school year as we have. We've talked about this often in superintendent's meeting. We were all hoping beyond hope that we would be returning to normal, and the beginning of school has been very challenging because of the nuances of the pandemic, the Delta, the mask, all the things that we are trying to address when you have children in buildings and trying to keep them and the staff members safe. Any question, anyone else have a question regarding that? Next, I'd like to direct your attention to the yellow, because we have all of these children quarantined. We have staff members, all of that. So what can we do as a school division to try to provide resources and support? One of the things that the Dixon County Public Schools has done is that we have asked to be a part of a program sponsored by the Virginia Department of Health, in that it will provide free COVID-19 screening testing programs to all of our students, our teachers, and staff for the upcoming year. So what that looks like is that we have a student that comes to school, they're showing symptoms. We, of course, must have the parental permission, or a staff member or a teacher. They can be tested right then, free of charge. It will take 24 hours for the test to be returned, and at that point, then we can work with that student, that teacher, and that staff member either to isolate that person if they are positive, or to work with them through a quarantine or a shorter quarantine period. We just received this information this week. As you recall, most of the schools in Virginia do not begin until after Labor Day. There are a few of us here in the far southwest that begin much earlier than Labor Day. So we are still waiting for more guidance on this, but we are prepared to go. If you recall, one of our nurses, Lily Thacker, has been named the testing director. So we're just waiting for the supplies, the training, and as soon as and I believe they called it a matching vendor, as soon as that has been done by the Virginia Department of Health, we're going to be asking our parents to please allow the school division, a registered nurse, to test our children, our staff, and our teachers if they are exhibiting any symptom at all. Again, it's free of charge. And it's quite expensive. We know that. You go to the doctor, you get tested, then you have to wait, all of those things. But if we can get this in place and get it in place quickly, for example, for athletic teams, for any kind of extracurricular activity, for any child or staff member that exhibits any kind of symptoms, then we feel this is a win-win situation. We will have a better control, and when I say control, we will have a better handle on the number of cases in our schools and what to do with quarantine and how many and what children to quarantine. Right now, these things are not in place. And so in discussions, if a child comes and they may be sick, but they don't have COVID, then that child can remain in school. Or if a child, and we hope that this is the option here, or if a child has COVID in a classroom and another child has been exposed, with the parental permission, we hope to test that child and we'll know immediately, okay, this child does or does not have COVID. So there's just a lot of things that are still being worked through. And I know that not only for board members, but for all of us that are working through this, it's very frustrating with that, as I said. And I keep saying that, but that's the only word that comes to our mind right now. So we're very excited by this. We feel that it's a great opportunity to work with our families and to work in our community. So as soon as this we are ready. We have the personnel in place, and we're ready to begin as soon as we get the green light. By the way, this is a program that will pay all expenses for 1 year for our nurse, supplies, COVID materials, everything, to test our children, our students, and our staff. So let me stop there, and are there any questions or comments there?
Yeah, I would just, like to I guess I'm definitely interested in how this would work, as it's been spoken on at length tonight. One huge issue in our school system is quarantining of well and healthy students who may, a lot of them will not ever develop symptoms, and there's a lot of negative impacts to that child when that happens, as we've spoken about. We do you do the best you can for that child not to fall behind, but we're in a different situation this year. The limitations that's been put on us to be able to make sure that student doesn't fall behind. And in this, what I would like to look at with this testing procedure is if it could be done in a way that maybe limits those healthy child quarantines. Are you thinking that way, or would this be a situation where we're testing before they come into school? How is that?
I'm afraid to answer any questions because I don't know enough about the information.
I understand.
And, we have, and I think I shared this email, I know that I did with our board members and also with our principals. We have asked the local health department regarding the 14 days. And that is what they're recommending at this time. Michelle McPherron, who is an excellent resource, shared with us that as soon as they see numbers that they can work with, then they will reconsider even having the child test after the 5th day and then come back. At this point, they cannot recommend that because we are in a upward ascent. There is no, not even a small dip. Our numbers in COVID right now are increasing, and the number in hospitals, all of those things are increasing. Now, the issue for the board and the issue for me is, and all of us that work with our children, is this. We don't want something to happen to a child because, number one, we were careless, or number two, we didn't follow a certain suggestion or a recommendation. Quite frankly, I would have a difficult time living with that if that were to happen under my watch. It may happen, but I have to know, and I think the board has directed me, that we are doing everything that we possibly can and much more to keep our students safe and to keep our staff safe. Now, do we have all the answers? Absolutely not. And as I tell our principals, I'm not certain we have all the questions either. But I think our staff is doing an excellent job in the number of actual COVID cases that we have in our school division and what they are doing to protect children and to protect themselves and each other. We've been in school 13 days, and as of today at 4:30, we have 13 students out of 2,000 approximately that have tested with COVID and 2 staff members. Now, I don't want to see that 13. Not at all. I don't want to see the 2 staff members. Not at all. But you see that we seem to be doing, we don't see triple-digit numbers at over 50. We don't see that. Now, these numbers were as of today at 4:40 p.m. Now, the number of quarantined children, we have 139 students quarantined and 4 staff members. Okay. Now, the 4 staff members have the option that after the 5th day, they can go get tested, and then they can come back after the 8th day. And of course, any vaccinated staff member doesn't have to quarantine. Our children don't have those options. And they are our most our most vulnerable population. Because they are the ones that do not have any access to vaccines if parents wanted to do that. So again, difficult decisions. I'm sure that there's many different opinions, but unless the direction from this board and what we have done from day one is that we try to follow the local health department and what they tell us, and because a child's life or a staff member's life is worth that much. So, any other questions regarding and I'm excited about the testing. I may just get tested just to see what, but I think this will be an open, I think this will provide some, and I guess the word is relief, to parents and families who are struggling, to schools that are struggling with the number of quarantined children, and also with staff members. Other questions or comments?
Now, what's really frustrating most about this quarantine, and we say healthy quarantine, whatever, the student that's been exposed, and if they can, because they ate lunch beside somebody that tested positive, then they go home and wrestle with their siblings. The siblings don't necessarily have to be quarantined, and so that's a very frustrating point, as it was last year. Of course, as we know, things are very different than last year. Yeah. But it would have been that whole family would have had, and all students would have had to quarantine just because that person who may have been exposed is in the same household. Yeah. And consistency is just, it's hard to...
It is. Now, what we have been told and what we follow, the contact of a contact does not have to quarantine. Okay, so in that situation, the child is exposed, he or she has to quarantine. Family members that are in contact with that person do not have to quarantine. Okay, the contact of a contact does not have to quarantine. But we have also had cases, Mr. Hicks, where a child has to be quarantined and then they test positive for COVID. That is the other issue with that. So, we're trying to balance the health of children and staff, the issue with quarantining and how frustrating that is for everyone, and then the fact that we're dealing with a virus that it takes 5 to 6 days for symptoms to appear. So that child may be fine first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, they're not feeling well. And then they have to, they test COVID. So it is very frustrating. I keep saying that word, so I apologize. I'll try to change it, but it's like maneuvering through a maze. We don't exactly know. But you're absolutely correct. And the consistency, sometimes is an issue also. That's why we try to deal with 1 or 2 people from our local health department so that we know, because different people will sometimes interpret things a little bit differently. Other questions or comments, or did that answer your question, Mr. Hicks? I don't know.
I don't know there was a question.
I understand.
I was just expressing some frustration.
Yeah, yes, sir.
It is frustrating. I mean, it's difficult to balance it. As you said, we're looking at the difference in last year when we had more flexibility with the state, and we have less flexibility due to a couple of those new laws, but yet some of the guidelines are not flexible. Mm-hmm. They're still aggressive. Yeah. And I don't know if, it's hard to, lose flexibility in one area and then, this is still an aggressive procedures Of course, you know, the safety issue is number one on everybody's mind.
Yes.
But we have to, we're here at the end of the day for the best interest of the kids and their education. And so they've put us in a very difficult, between a rock and a hard place, if you want to say that.
And that's what it feels like.
It does, and, you know, I guess because we are at the, I guess, mercy of the Virginia Department of Health, I guess just to advocate to them that, you know, to the extent that possible, we have to provide an education for our students, and at least advocate that in our school system, in our schools, that we know the guidelines. We know what their guidelines are. They aren't as flexible. They are difficult to deal with due to the lack of flexibility we have from the state in those new Senate bills. But let's, I guess, there's probably, you know, and I know you're talking about a nurse there that, you know, they don't want to be able to test back out. Okay, and that may change. The way you're speaking, that may change once this levels out. But hopefully, you know, we can, you know, kind of not let them put it on us, make them stick to their own guidelines in how we're approaching public health.
If you recall last year, we were being quarantined for, I remember, at that time, the cases were such, and I hope that it returns to this soon, that students could be tested after the 5th day and they could come back to the 8th day. In December, the cases started increasing, and we received, which I shared with you, a letter from the health director for Lenowisco and Cumberland Plateau that said, we can no longer do this. All students have to quarantine for 10 days. And that was a change. You know, we had to change in midstream, okay? And that affected athletic teams, that affected everything. So our hope is this, that COVID will begin to level out the numbers with our community and our children, that we are all doing everything that we can individually and as a school division to keep our students and our staff healthy, and that those numbers will begin to level off. When those numbers begin to level off and we have more flexibility about whether a student can come back after the 5th day or with a negative result or 10th day, you know, we'll immediately, if that's a recommendation, we'll immediately implement that. You know, I will inform you of that notice, and your direction has been, you know, if this is what it has, the local health department is doing it, we will implement that immediately. Right now, we do not have that flexibility. The flexibility is 14 days for our children in close contact, and there's a lot of interpretation for that, and that is what we are following as a school division, their recommendation. More information on this free COVID testing as soon as it comes. And again, excited to see that option being open for all of our school family. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our next agenda item is update on the new elementary school. Ms. Robinson.
All right. Mr. Burge, you have before you a packet that I gave you, I hope. Yes.
Yep.
And if you look at the last picture, you'll see a beautiful sunset. I love that picture, Mr. Burge. Did you take that, sir?
Yes, I did.
I thought you did.
All those pictures are taken by me. Good or bad? Well, it's been a pretty busy month out there on the job site. Walls are going up, floors have been poured, electricians are working, plumbers are working. So it's going really well out there. Scants continues to attend progress meetings and approve pay apps and all the stuff that we do, as well as making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do and using the right products. Actually, today I had to say something, and sure enough, they didn't have the right product. So I saved the contractor a lot of trouble. So that was a good thing. But anyway, the project still remains within budget of the 24,561.867. Like I said, the ICF walls are up. In the kitchen, they've been poured. They will pour the art rooms tomorrow all the way up to the roof deck, just like they are in the kitchen. The gym walls are going up, the CMU walls. The ICF walls are going up to a certain height. Then they have to brace them off before they can pour them. They'll move the braces from what we just poured over to those as soon as they come available. The last slab pour was poured yesterday, with the exception of the electrical room. Everything is poured out there as far as the floors in the building. So it's going really well. We're still working with
Have the video?
We will here in a minute.
Oh, okay.
She's working on it.
Okay.
We are continuing to work with the owner on procuring the IT equipment and the interactive boards and that type of stuff, as well as working with the furniture supplier. Let's see if we can get that up and going. Yep, the presentation.
You also have a copy of that with you, so. Mr. Browning, could you lower the lights when the video starts, sir? Thank you.
Oh, you don't have the presentation? Okay, well, let's go through the presentation. Y'all have it in front of you anyway. The first set of pictures there is in July. On the left there, you can see what the art room looked like and the cafeteria. And then on the right there, you can see what it looks like to now. So some of these are before and after. The next page, we have pictures of the classroom wing and some of the office area in July and what it looks like now. As you can see, the floor's been poured, the walls are beginning to go up, so it's going, like I said, very well. Next page is the classroom wing. As you can see on that one on the left, it was hardly anything done there. On the right there, you can see the floors poured, and some of the ICF walls are up about 3 or 4 feet. The next page, we have, this is kind of the nursing area, looking from the front entrance kind of down the hall. There on the left, you see everything there, and then on the right, you can see the concrete poured and the ICF walls going up, with the window frames in over there where the classrooms go on the right. Then we go up on the roof and start looking down. This is looking down on the art room, the kitchen, the cafeteria. As you can see, the walls are topped out, and they'll be taking the bracing down once everything's poured tomorrow. They'll take it down probably first of the week. And that area there will be ready for a bar joist to start on the 8th of September is when they're scheduled to be here. And then we can start putting roof deck on that area. Next page is just a look down the main corridor when you walk in the front door. If you're looking down the hallway, you can see the scaffolds up there. The gym wall there is going up. It's pretty good ways up thus far, as well as some of the walls in the corridor. And of course, the last picture, I took this one on Monday evening, and they hadn't poured the slab yet in the classroom wing. So that's where, that's a picture of that area. All right, we're ready for the video. This is a 90-second video. Last month, I didn't have a video because of the meeting. This video will cover from the previous month's meeting on June 23rd to today. So this you'll be able to see how it's changed in 2 months.
Get ready.
Right? You'll be amazed. Goes kind of quick, though. You can see the plumber's been working in the kitchen area, and they've been putting foundation walls in. Continue to work over on the other wing. The site guys have been putting in storm work and water lines, electrical. They're starting to grade the slab out and getting ready for a pour. They continue to get the pour ready, the slab ready to pour. Now you can see the air barrier going down in the kitchen area and other areas as well. Now they got the pump truck. Well, they had the pump truck. That was fast. Where they were pouring. Walls are going up. You can see the big window frames going up on the bus entrance side, and then next to the building, there's the art room and those areas. Block walls going up in the kitchen, and outside walls. And you can even see the walls in the gym going up over there to the right. Pouring more concrete. And that's where we are today.
Amazing. Thank you.
So, any questions? Comments, questions? Be glad to
I
answer.
think it's
if I can.
great. It looks really great.
We're very pleased with the progress. They're doing a great job. I've been looking behind them when they do before they pour walls. The testing agency's been checking to make sure. So we're going to have a very well insulated and building. I spoke with the Nudura supplier yesterday. That's who's supplying the ICF. And he said you will see a very grave difference between the heating bill in that building and this building, just because of the way the walls are put together. Okay. Any questions or comments?
Wonderful.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you. Very good.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct the board's attention to good news from our school. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Of course, Mr. Setzer is not here, but we would like to recognize his retirement of 30 years. We miss him. We are very glad that Ms. Martin is with us, but we certainly miss Mr. Setzer and wish him the best. We have a bill for him, but he told us that he probably would not come to receive it, but I still do want to recognize Mr. Setzer and his contribution to the school system for the last 30 years. I think Mr. Setzer is one of those people that we're going to miss more and more as time goes on, because we know we'll realize the work that he did behind the scenes to kind of run things smoothly for us. And so again, just please join me in congratulating him and thanking him for all of his contribution and work with his students. He's a difficult one again to replace, but we are very glad that Ms. Martin can be with us. Another mention on on good news from the school is just the beginning of school update, and I've included that in some of our comments regarding COVID numbers. We know, I think as you talk to principals and teachers, superintendents, this school year has been challenging. As I said, many nuances and new issues. We are looking, and I think one of our staff members, our speakers spoke about the emergency pay for sick days. I do think that that is something that the board needs to review. We had last year, the emergency paid leave is no longer available. And at this time, Ms. Taylor is working on exactly what was that expense last year of teachers who took the emergency paid leave. So we will have more information on the board, for the board on that. One of the issues for us has been, and it's that some of our teachers who have been vaccinated and fully vaccinated have tested positive for COVID. And definitely I believe that those staff members, we need to look at them very carefully because they did the things that they needed to do, and then to look at other staff members who chose perhaps not to be vaccinated because of personal or sickness or things like that. But if you'll just let us have some time to look at our numbers, in researching with other school divisions, there are several school divisions that have taken the position that they're not going to pay emergency, and I'm just going to call it paid leave. Others are doing a modified version of that. Others are doing it to a certain deadline, like September 30th. Mr. Mullins, did I miss anyone? I know that did I miss any of the other options? But we will certainly look at that, look at the expense of that, and then have a proposal for the board soon about what to do with staff members that have to quarantine or staff members that do get COVID, especially the ones that have been vaccinated, and then they still have a breakthrough infection. So just to allow the board to know that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Brings us up to the update on the approval of appropriations and carryover funds from the Board of Supervisors. Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you. We are delighted that the Board of Supervisors last night at their August meeting approved the total carryover for the school division. We would like to commend the Board of Supervisors for keeping their word and doing exactly what they shared with us that they were going to do. We are very appreciative of that and hope to continue now addressing and focusing on the issues at hand. So again, very good news in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And the Dickens County Public School 10-day enrollment report, Mrs. Robinson.
Oh, thank you, and I promise I will turn over the meeting in just a moment to other members of our staff. If you'll look, please, at the blue section. This is our 10-day report. As of Friday, August the 20th. We had a total of K through 12 students of 1,955, minus, of course, the no-shows, and then a grand total in pre-K of 81. That was as of Friday, August the 20th. We ended the year, I think I shared that with the board, 1932. The 13-day report, pre-K through 12, 1,885. Virtual students has decreased from the Friday report to 59, and instead of the 50 or 30 no-shows that we had on Friday, August the 20th, we now have 17. So that brings us up to, not in K through 12, 1,961 children, and in pre-K, 80. So those numbers appear to be higher than they were in June of 2021. So again, we will closely monitor these numbers and then again have a report to the board on attendance by school at the September meeting. Ms. Martin, is there anything else that you needed to add? Okay. A grand total of pre-K and K through 12 students, 2,041.
2001.
I will send this out to the board for your information. The information I was just going for the 13-day. Questions or comments about the 10-day enrollment as of August the 20th? Any questions or comments regarding that? Any comments about the day 13 attendance? Again, total K through 12, 1,885. 59 virtual, and that's a decrease from Friday of 64. For a grand total of 2,041 students. Okay. Hearing no question, Mr. Chair, I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Okay, it brings us down to the certification of the 2021-22 DCPS crisis plan. Mrs. Robinson.
Each school's crisis plan was emailed to you for your review and consideration. Virginia Code 22.1.1-279.8 requires all public schools to annually review the written school crisis emergency management and medical emergency response plans for each school, its supervisors. My role is to certify no later than August the 31st that plan has been reviewed. And so we would just like to ask the board to certify by saying I certified that you have reviewed the crisis plans as presented.
I certify. I certify.
I certify.
Thank you very much, and we will complete the appropriate paperwork to the VDOE to assure that our board has certified the review of the crisis plans. And again, thank you.
Approval of the VSBA DCPS policy, student fees, fines, and charges.
And that will be Ms. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, the rest of the board, I bring to you tonight the VSBA DCPS policy JN. The policy is student fees, fines, and charges. In the policy, it's about 3 or 4 pages. The only thing that we added to the policy was there in the middle of the page where it's bold, and we put in the fees for Chromebook usage and, well, not usage, but for damage to our Chromebooks. And it's basically the following fees are charged. The Dickinson County School Board may institute an action or recover for the parents' damages suffered by the willful and malicious destruction of or damage to public property by minors not to exceed $2,500 A fee not to exceed a student's pro rata share of the cost of providing transportation for voluntary extracurricular activities. A fee not to exceed a student's pro rata share of the cost of field trips or educational equaling related programs that are not required in instructional activities. The actual cost of lost, damaged, or destroyed textbooks. 1 through 4 was already in the policy. We added number 5, which is the cost of, the cost of repairs or replacement for student computing devices. A computing device can be considered one of the following: Chromebook, Windows laptop, or iPad. The following fees will be charged: $57 for a damaged screen, $47 for a replacement battery, $38 for a replacement keyboard, and $25 for a replacement charger. I ask for the board's approval of the revisions made to policy JN.
Any questions or discussions on the proposed VSBA recommended policies?
I'm just asking, how did we come to the figures for the screens, batteries, board, chargers, and those kind of things?
I would like to defer that to Mr. Wallace, our director of
Technology.
because this is from his policy that we added it to.
And you kind of answered, I'm telling you, just trying to tell you what I'm thinking through on this. There's a much different level of a Chromebook, let's say year 1 versus year 4 or 5, which is at the end of its life, and we're looking at losing anyway. So that's why I was looking at, I know it's harder to come up with a different prorated number for those things, but at the same time, I also think it's kind of fair too.
Yeah, these were based off the majority of our Chromebooks, which is HP Chromebooks 14As. These are the exact numbers we get from our retail that sells us these replacement parts. So, and actually, that number can fluctuate from month to month, year to year. We've actually seen a big seen it go up big time this year, just because the the need for everyone across the country to have parts. Yes, so I mean that's kind of a set number, kind of a base number we got because we have bought a lot of these parts in anticipation for breakage. So that's where we come up with them.
Thank you, Ms. Ron.
Any other questions? I'll try to answer them, or point you to who can answer them.
Do we have a motion to approve as presented?
Motion on the floor? No, there's no motion.
I'll move to
Second.
approve those policy changes.
All those in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is public surplus. Mrs. Robertson?
I think, Mr. Mullins, your computer may be off, or your microphone, sir. I'd like to direct the board's attention to the approval to declare the following equipment as public surplus for public sale. Approximately 8 Kenwood portable school radios and HYT portable radios. We have gone through a radio upgrade and would like to declare these as surplus. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Need a motion to that?
Discussion?
I'll move to declare surplus.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. That brings us down to proposed revision
FY 22, Mrs. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you should have received a proposed budget revision earlier today, and there's also in your packet. In reviewing our approved fiscal year 22 budget, we have found that there is $263,000 in utilities that we will not be anticipating the need for in that line item. We are asking you to approve the budget revision with net zero budget effect to move that $263,000 to materials and supplies in the amount of $28,000, fuel in the amount of $20,000, and capital outlay additions for the purchase of 2 buses in the amount of $215,000. Again, this has zero net effect on the budget. It's just recategorizing expenditures.
Mr. Chair, we would just ask for a motion so that it has board approval.
We have a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? Sure. How did we save $263,000 in utilities?
There was a payment to SunTrust that was a previous train contract. We made a payment in that amount that freed us up from that debt. That debt is retired. It was budgeted in utilities. Since we made that payment, we no longer need it in utilities.
Do we have a motion as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
This concludes our open session and time for board comment. Start with Mr. Hackney down there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to thank some of the people that came out again tonight. Our last few meetings have been engaging, and glad to see people here and glad to see people advocating for our students. I view that as our number one job as a board, is to advocate for the best interest of students. They provided some really good information, Mr. Sutherland and Mr. Blansett. The important thing to note about information that they provided us is it's evidence-based, it's fact-based, it's scientifically based. And those are the types of guides that we need when we make decisions. We have to consider the science, we have to consider evidence. Evidence-based practices is very important in education and everything we do. So, I'd just like to see us move forward in that direction, that we're using evidence and science in the decisions that we make, the considerations for the best educational practices of our students. We do have difficulties in accomplishing lots of those things due to some things beyond our control. There's entities above Dickinson County that dictate some things that we're able to do, and that dictates limitations that we have in order to be able to provide our students with the best possible situation. So we have to work with those limitations the best that we can. Do want to speak to what Ms. Tipton spoke on. It's been weighing on me this week a lot, and thinking about, go back to, we ask a lot, we have asked a lot of our students. I will say that in all this, the price they've paid has been tremendous in all this, and it's not their fault, and we got to keep doing the best that we can to find ways to make their educational experience as normal as possible in a very difficult and challenging time. But that leads me back to what Ms. Tipton spoke about. It's a difficult situation because we're also asking a lot of our staff. We're asking a tremendous amount of them, and since this pandemic started. And I was very glad to hear Ms. Robinson recommend to the board and encourage the board to consider that situation as beyond our control, that you have staff that are being required to quarantine and use their sick time that they work very hard to accrue, and they may have plans for. I mean, you might have something booked, and you've already paid for it, and that could very easily get wiped out because, you know, you're in a situation that you're required to quarantine, and you know, I advocate for all staff that we look at what we can do. I know that there's a few items that I looked at while I was thinking about this week, and look forward to seeing what Ms. Taylor's able to work out. I think we may be able to look at some ESSER funds that were provided for Edgenuity. I think it's $750,000. That I don't know how much. I mean, I don't know the numbers, and you'll be able to figure those out about how much of that is going to be left over after all the requirements we have for Edgenuity. But that's one maybe among others that of scenarios to consider, and I think the big thing is just as a board I hope that as a board we're committed to alleviating a very difficult situation for our staff. I know I am. Thank you.
I would certainly agree with that and support the investigation to determine exactly what can be done. Nobody wants to see an employee and their family penalized for the part of this pandemic that's affecting us at this time. It's worrisome enough. I, like everyone else, I'm frightened by all of this. We don't make these numbers here, and I don't know what people out there think. We don't just come up with them. We work with the health department, and we work with the CDC. Of course, they work more with the CDC than we do, but we listen to them, and my time in the school division, going back, you know, we always have. But in my time, we've never had to deal with anything like this either. So everybody's kind of got an opinion here and there. And my opinion is what it is, but I have to listen to those people that are experts in the field of what's best in dealing with the impact of this on individuals and students and faculty and everybody around us. Those people have to be regarded as the people who provide the guidance that those of us like myself, I don't pretend to be an expert on anything. And my advice would be worthless, except what I can do in my own home and with my own family. But we do have to listen to those people that through all the years have been faithful to us and guiding us through every challenge that we've had to face regarding public health. This isn't anything new. It's just much bigger and more threatening than anything we've faced. And I guess all the years this school, well, we were here in 1917, but certainly we have met the challenge through the years, and I certainly think we're up to it now. I certainly think about the grandparents and the parents and all of our students and all of our staff, and hope that everybody takes the individual responsibility to do what they can to diminish the effect of what we face. We're all in this together. I appreciate the hard work that's been done in these first days and all the arrangements and changes that have had to be made and challenges met. But we need to work together as best we can and realize that we're all here to have the same outcomes. That's what's best for our children.
Well, I'll echo what you guys said, and just to add to that, I hope that what we've laid out here or what is being laid before us as far as quarantine goes and those kind of things, that hopefully we're on a tipping point. I know now that our numbers are still rapidly increasing. There's the little bit of two different things that the health department will say, whether it's 14 days because we are in a high transmission area at the time, but you could reduce it down to 10. You know, I'm hoping that it looks like that we can get back down and reduce those days, and then possibly even with the testing, that maybe that would even limit those days even down further if they'll give us that flexibility. So I hope that's the way that the health department is leaning. You know, it's frustrating to folks, I know. You know, I've got a family member that's out in quarantine right now, out of school, and I'm not sure that he's terribly upset about it, but he's out. He's going to miss a football game. He's upset about that, so I get it. And so this was a discussion that I'd had yesterday, as a matter of fact, with folks about the numbers of days and those kind of things. Very, very interested in seeing what numbers we can come up with, the possibility of those quarantine days, and alleviate some of those, some stress from our teachers and staff. Hopefully there's something that we can do there. And really, and I'd heard this, and I just want to commend our group. I never thought about this, but I guess when my nephew he's in this quarantine, and playing football and this, that, and the other, but they had come up with a plan to limit the number of people that could go into the dressing room at one time or another, so it would limit the exposure, and I'd never thought of that. So I just want to commend our coaches and staff and AD and all. You know, that was kind of outside the box thinking a little bit that would limit those numbers for those, and so I just commend them for their efforts in that.
Looks like the building process is going great.
Dr. Law, I believe you're off,
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The building process looks like it's going great. I can't wait to get in it. As I mentioned in our last meeting, we all took an oath to obey the law, and we will obey the law, although I may not, or we may not agree with the state mandates, but the ones that are presented as the law, we will obey. Thank you.
Well, to say the least, it's been some very challenging times. And what I'd like to do is to commend all of our staff who's been so dedicated in a very tough situation. Each one of the department heads and the superintendent. And last but not least, this board that I serve with. You've had to make some tough decisions. And I say I'm so proud to serve with you, and that you've had to make those decisions and have made those decisions with the highest of moral character. And a real blessing with SCANSA and what they've been able to do. All of this looks great, and I appreciate each one of you. At this time, we will now go into closed session. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711, Paragraph A of the Code of Virginia, I move that we convene a closed meeting for the following purposes: employment issues relating to discussion or consideration of specific individuals for employment as Director of Instruction, cooks, speech-language pathology, assistant, part-time aides, part-time custodians, substitutes, coaches. Thank you, part-time custodians, substitutes, coaches, FMLA request, resignations, and the division superintendent's evaluation pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. student issues associated with the parents' request for delayed entry to school and parental homeschooling requests pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711A and 2, to consult with legal counsel regarding the investment of public funds associated with school construction and consultation regarding actual or probable litigation, along with a consultation regarding specific matters requiring legal advice pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A, 6, 7, and 8 of the Code of Virginia. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We're now in closed session. To come out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now out of closed session. Mrs. Robinson, will you please read the certification?
Whereas the Dixon County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this day pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Dixon County School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only the public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard or discussed. Board members, would you please certify?
I certify.
I certify.
I certify.
I certify.
I certify.
Are there any motions from closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that all matters related to employee employment issues as discussed in executive session be approved by the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any other motions to be made?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that students numbered A1 through A101 who asked for permission to be homeschooled, that those requests be granted.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Is there any other business to discuss?
Mr. Chairman, I have one other one. There's one other motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that student 102 to 103, that their request for religious exemption be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Is there any other business to discuss? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting's now adjourned.